Welcome, students. I am absolutely thrilled to have you here today. We are jumping straight into Chapter 13 of your NCERT Science textbook, and I've got a lot of energy for this one. In this explainer, we're going to decode the exact rules that govern our natural world. We'll be looking at literally everything, from that little garden in your neighborhood all the way up to the entire globe. By the end of this, you are going to have total conceptual mastery of how it all connects.
Okay, we have got a lot of ground to cover today to hit that mastery level. So here's our roadmap for this explainer. First, what is an ecosystem? Second, food chains and webs. Third, the flow of energy. Fourth, the biological magnification trap. Fifth, human impact, specifically ozone and garbage. And finally, number 6, checking your understanding. Let's get to it.
All right, kicking things off with Section 1, what is an ecosystem? Setting the stage. Let's just pause and ask ourselves a really fundamental question. What exactly makes up the environment around us?
Well, imagine your local neighborhood park. You've got grass, maybe some roses, a couple of frogs hopping around, or insects buzzing by. An ecosystem is simply this beautifully balanced interaction between those living things, the biotic components like plants and animals, and the non-living, abiotic physical factors around them. Things like temperature, rainfall, the soil you're standing on, and the wind. Forests and lakes, those are completely natural ecosystems. But your garden, or a farmer's crop field, those are actually human-made, artificial ecosystems. Kind of cool to think about, right?
Let's mentally walk through Activity 13.2 from your textbook, Setting Up an Aquarium. You are basically playing architect and building a self-sustaining artificial ecosystem from scratch. You carefully balance your producers, like aquatic plants that make food using sunlight, with your consumers, like the fish that eat that food. But what happens if a plant or a fish dies? If you don't actively clean that tank, microorganisms like bacteria and fungi step in to do the dirty work. These guys are your decomposers. They break down all those complex organic dead remains into simple inorganic substances that wash right back into the soil or water. Seriously, without decomposers, the Earth would just be one giant piling mountain of dead matter.
Moving right along to Section 2, food chains and webs. Who eats whom? Let's figure out how all these ecosystem components actually interact with each other. Now, what's really fascinating here is how we map out the whole who eats whom dynamic. We organize this massive feeding frenzy into what we call trophic levels. Think of it like a relay race. We start strictly at the first level with autotrophs, or producers. They are the ones fixing up that raw solar energy. Then they pass the baton of energy up to the second level, the primary consumers, or herbivores. Next up, the secondary consumers, your small carnivores, sitting at the third level. And finally, we hit the fourth level with the tertiary consumers, the really large carnivores.
But here's the thing. Nature rarely follows a straight, perfectly simple line. Usually, a single organism is on the menu for 2 or more other kinds of organisms, which in turn are eaten by several others. So instead of just a straight-line food chain, organisms interact in this incredibly complex, branching, and honestly beautiful network that we call a food web. It's like a giant puzzle where everything is interconnected.
All right, Section 3, the flow of energy, nature's economy. Let's see how the currency of energy actually flows through that intricate biological web we just mapped out.
Okay, pay close attention to this, because here is the absolute golden rule of nature's economy, the 10% law.
Let's unpack what this means. First off, green plants in a terrestrial ecosystem are actually remarkably selective. They capture only about 1% of the sunlight energy falling on their leaves to convert into food energy. Just 1%. Then, when those plants are eaten by primary consumers, a massive chunk of that energy is lost as heat to the environment or just used up for the animal's digestion and daily work. On average, only 10% of the food eaten is actually turned into the consumer's own body mass and made available for the next level. Think of it as nature's tax. Because nature places this strict 90% tax on energy at every single step, food chains rarely exceed 3 or 4 steps. There just isn't enough energy left. And crucially, this energy flow is strictly unidirectional. The energy passing to the herbivores, it never ever goes backward to the producers.
Which brings us to Section 4, the biological magnification trap, the top predator tax. So while energy rapidly decreases as we climb up the food chain, something else actually increases.
Let's trace the journey of a harmful, non-degradable chemical, like a synthetic pesticide used on crops.
First, it washes away into the soil or local water bodies. From there, it gets absorbed by aquatic plants and animals. Now, because these chemicals are non-degradable, they don't just magically disappear. Instead, they accumulate progressively at each and every trophic level. And here's the kicker. Because we human beings occupy the very top level in pretty much any food chain, we unfortunately accumulate the maximum possible concentration of these toxic chemicals right inside our own bodies. This process is called biological magnification, and it is exactly why even perfectly washed fruits and grains can still contain chemical pesticide residues. Wild, right?
Let's zoom out a bit for Section 5, Human Impact, Ozone and Garbage, Breaking the Rules. Now we're looking at the global scale to see how human activities are literally breaking the fundamental rules of our natural ecosystems.
Way up in the higher levels of our atmosphere, ozone performs an absolutely essential function, even though down here at ground level, it's actually a deadly poison. So how is it formed up there? Well, high-energy UV radiation from the sun violently splits molecular oxygen, that's O2, into free, highly reactive oxygen atoms. These free, solo atoms then quickly combine with remaining O2 molecules to form O3, which is ozone.
Now, this ozone layer acts as a crucial planetary shield for the Earth, protecting all of us from the sun's incredibly harsh ultraviolet radiation. But back in the 1980s, scientists noticed the amount of ozone was dropping sharply. The culprit, synthetic chemicals like chlorofluorocarbons, or CFCs, which were widely used in refrigerators and ACs. Thankfully, in 1987, the United Nations Environment Program, UNEP, successfully forged an agreement to freeze CFC production globally at 1986 levels. This is just a fantastic real-world example of international coordination actually working to protect our environment.
Down on the ground, however, we have a completely different, massive garbage problem. Think back to the life processes we've studied before. Enzymes in biology are highly specific. They act like a lock and key. I mean, you wouldn't get any energy if you tried to eat a lump of coal, right? Your body can't process it. Similarly, decomposers have specific biological enzymes. Their biological processes can easily break down a banana peel, which makes it biodegradable. But those same bacteria absolutely cannot digest human-made plastics. Because of this, these plastic materials are non-biodegradable and will just sit there, persisting in our environment for a very, very long time, only slowly breaking down by physical processes like heat and pressure.
All right, we are at Section 6, Checking Your Understanding. Textbook Review. You guys have the core concepts down flat, so let's tackle a couple of the main textbook exercises together and see how you do. Think about this one carefully. What would happen if we were to completely wipe out all the organisms in just one trophic level? Say we magically removed all the primary consumers. What happens to the entire ecosystem?
The whole system completely collapses. Remember how we learned that energy flow is strictly unidirectional? Well, severing that link permanently stops the energy from moving up the chain. The predators in the higher trophic levels would literally starve to death with nothing to eat. Meanwhile, the organisms in the lower trophic level, suddenly without any predators to keep their numbers in check, would completely overpopulate and just exhaust all their own resources. It's a total disaster.
Okay, let's try one more classic multiple-choice question directly from your textbook exercises. Which of these groups contains strictly only biodegradable items? Is it Group A, grass, flowers, and leather? Group B, grass, wood, and plastic? Or Group C, fruit peels, cake, and lime juice? Well, if you picked Groups A and C, you nailed it. Grass, flowers, leather, fruit peels, cake, and lime juice. These are all naturally occurring organic materials. That means they can be successfully broken down by the specific enzymatic action of our helpful decomposer, bacteria, and fungi. Group B totally fails because of that human-made plastic, which, as we know, decomposers simply do not have the biological keys to process. So, I'm going to leave you with this final critical thought. Massive improvements in our modern lifestyles have created tremendous amounts of disposable, non-biodegradable waste, particularly in the packaging of the stuff we buy every day. Knowing what we now know about those highly specific enzymes and the incredibly delicate balance of our ecosystems, how long can our natural world possibly survive when its biological decomposers are totally powerless to clean up the modern mess we're leaving behind? Really think on that. Keep asking questions and keep studying hard.